Welcome to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba. Thanks for joining us. I've got Keith Barthold, CEO and founder of DKBinnovative with me. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Okay, Keith, what do business leaders need to know about cybersecurity?
I think the big thing with cybersecurity is that it's out there, and the statistics aren't really in your favor.
No,
you know, 1 in 5 small to medium-sized businesses, these businesses with less than 1,000 people, are going to be breached each year, and so it's the stats are overwhelming, and the cost of those breaches are overwhelming. It's enough to take a business down.
Yeah, you feel so defenseless when it comes to that if you don't have somebody like you working with you, because there's nothing you can do. You're held ransom and they crash your business immediately. So what are some of the first steps that people need to, aside from calling you and employing you, to protect themselves in this process?
Yeah, well, I think it's really awareness and understanding, well, what are the threats for your specific business? You know, if you're a hospital or a financial services entity or, you know, a tailor or mechanic, you have a very different risk profile based on what that data is and, you know, different regulatory compliance that you have to meet and other things that are just best practices to keep your business intact and prevent a breach. And really, one of the hardest things is evaluating, you know, what are those threats and what is appropriate, acceptable risk versus, you know, what do I need to spend some money on and get very serious on putting controls in place to protect myself.
Give me some examples. You can use me for an example.
Sure. I mean, you know, Pci Compliance is a great example. There's different layers of it. If you're accepting credit cards, depending on the volume of transactions, you know, you have options at whether you use a third party to process those credit card transactions or do those yourself. When you get to a certain level, you know, it makes sense to do it yourself because of the fees and the costs involved. But the flip side of that is that you have to have additional compliance measures because you're taking that data directly, and if there is a breach, then there are lots of fines associated with it. There's obviously a lot of cleanup and bringing in cybersecurity experts, doing forensics, legal costs, and then that's not even to mention the PR costs because if your business relies on that, then and you get attacked and you're holding that data, then who's going to trust you at that point?
What are some of the tips that you can give our audience to kind of get a hint, hey, maybe you have been breached?
Yeah, I think...
Or you wouldn't know until somebody checked.
And that's the problem, is that the majority of businesses that are breached don't know it. They have hackers in their system, they have data that's being extracted, and they're just not aware of it. And so a lot of that awareness comes with education, educating yourself, educating your employees, and knowing what to look for. You know, you think of things as simple as phishing attacks and making sure that the domain is the correct domain, and this is really the correct I
learned that
email,
the hard way.
Right?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so a lot of people have lost thousands of dollars, right, because they initiate a wire transfer because their CFO asked them to, and it wasn't their CFO. But it's getting harder and harder to spot that because there are no misspellings or Asian princesses asking for $1 million. You know, those scams have really become a thing of the past, and so it's getting harder to spot. If you think about just the security controls that you need yourself to protect your clients from being breached, those are very important because it's not necessarily about you avoiding being scammed by a phishing campaign. It's about making sure someone didn't get your password, breach your email account, and then starts scamming your clients.
Right.
Because then you've got a whole other issue of, you know, am I liable for reimbursing what was lost from my clients? And then obviously a huge distrust and PR issue that you've got to deal with, if not legal and insurance battles alone.
Before we get into the dark web, and I'm really interested in that because it's a big mystery for most people as well as myself, what are some of the latest creative scams or creative breach processes you've seen come over that the audience can say, oh wow?
I think one of the most dangerous that we see is the phishing scam, to where social engineering is performed to capture some information, and you're not even aware of it. Maybe information was taken from the cell phone company, and they now have some private information of yours, and they're able to use that and seed that to cause further damage. A great example, we dealt with it was a friend of a client that was ordering parts through a large parts distributor for a construction vehicle. Mm-hmm. About $50,000 worth of parts and a big job that was being done. Later in that conversation, it was requested, well, we can give you a discount by doing an immediate wire transfer of half the invoice. And everything up to that point, including the quote that the gentleman the victim had received, was legitimate. But someone was watching that email on the outside and waited for the right time to strike and said, hey, I can give you a discount if you'll approve this now. Here's the account. And then, $30,000 was lost and ended up somewhere in South America. And so, in hindsight, looking at that, you go, well, how could I have really prevented this? And it's very difficult. That's a matter of educating all of your employees, having controls and systems in place, and then having policy in place to go, look, I'm never going to send a wire transfer unless I have a phone call, unless I have additional processes and systems in place to where I can validate that the person on the other side of the email is who you think it is.
Is it possible to be able to ever get that money back, to back trace it and where it went, or once it's gone, it's gone? It
all depends on the situation. It depends on the bank and the bank's controls and their policies. Mm-hmm. It also depends on how that money was taken. Did someone else initiate that, where it was a crime and it was taken from you, or were you tricked into giving it to someone? And some banks would say that if you gave that, then you willfully gave that up, right? Even though you were scammed and tricked into it. The other thing is, this is where cybercrime insurance for a business comes in, and making sure that your carriers are providing those, the appropriate coverages for crimes, for phishing and scamming.
Are there origins or geographic locations that are more prevalent for where crime is coming from these days, or does it matter?
I don't think it's really relevant.
There
are hot spots, and a lot of it though it's kind of like money laundering. I guess it hops from one place to the other. It makes it very difficult to track.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a lot with ISIS and the things in Syria and
yeah,
Russia.
But you mentioned like South America. So mm-hmm. are these people just hopping around playing, living the lush life, and that's where their basis of operation is, or buying shipping containers and shipping themselves around the world and keeping them being a moving target? Is that what?
Yeah,
these guys are
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. Yeah, it's very sophisticated, and a lot of it's government sponsored, right? You have Russia, you have North Korea, and these entities that fund the government through hacking activities. And it's not just a conspiracy. Confirmed government entities that are performing hacking and taking money, because it's a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, trillions.
Tell me about the dark web.
Yeah, so the dark web, think of it as a anonymous Craigslist.
Okay.
And using a specialized browser, you can get there, and all of the transactions are done using Bitcoin, or some type of cryptocurrency, so that those transactions are anonymous. And so it creates this giant marketplace for illegal activity, be it be it drug sales or prostitution or money laundering. You can hire hitmen on the dark web, and so one of the things as it relates to cybersecurity is it's now become an exchange for password information, and so this is where it's made the protection of passwords very, very important, because now, it's not that a large entity like LinkedIn, like they want your password to LinkedIn so they can do big damage there. What are they going to do with a LinkedIn password, right? The problem is that over 70% of users use the same passwords and duplicate their passwords. So if I'm using a password with administrative controls and email access and banking access, all within my company, and it's the same password that I used in 2016 on LinkedIn when LinkedIn was breached, chances are that password has gone up for sale or has been on an exchange on the dark web. Others can get it, and now they can get in and breach your system by buying thousands of compromised accounts, trying those until they get a hit, and then exploiting it. Because all they really have to do is get into your email and watch that email, and then figure out, what do I pick off next? Do I pick off your cell phone account? Take this, and then it's massive identity theft.
Wow. Is there any tips or statements that you want to make to the audience about how to protect themselves, and really what you're doing different so that the people that are out there that aren't breached yet, or they are breached, can either repair the damage or prevent it?
Yeah, so I think the simplest advice is using great passwords and just being really disciplined about passwords. Not using the same passwords, making them complex, and changing them often. And so, like what we like to say is that you should treat your passwords like your underpants. You should change them often. Don't leave them lying around, and definitely do not share them.
Okay. That's good.
So, keep it simple. Have good discipline and use of your passwords, and you'll be much better off.
Got it. Thanks for being here.
You bet. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. All right, you've been watching CEO Money with Michael Yorba. Don't forget, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.